This story explores mature emotional themes and is intended for an adult audience. While it does not contain explicit material, viewer discretion is advised. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain that had fallen earlier in the evening. I sat alone in the dimly lit living room, the soft hum of the television filling the quiet space. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. He was late. Again. I tried not to let worry consume me, but it was impossible. My stepson, Ethan, had never been the reckless type. At 24, he was responsible, dependable. Yet lately, something had changed. He had been coming home later and later, his eyes heavy with an unspoken weight, his smiles fewer and far between. I had tried asking before, gently nudging him to open up, but he had always deflected with a tired chuckle and a vague excuse. Just busy, he'd say. But busy with what? Or who? The familiar creak of the front door jolted me from my thoughts. I turned, watching as Ethan stepped inside, his tall frame silhouetted against the glow of the porch light. His dark hair was slightly damp, as if he had been caught in the rain, and his deep blue eyes carried something I couldn't quite decipher. "You're up," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. "I couldn't sleep," I admitted, searching his expression. "You're home late again." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before fading just as quickly. He ran a hand through his hair and let out a soft sigh. "I know, I had a lot to think about." I stood, crossing the room to meet him. "Ethan, what's going on? You've been different lately. Distant." He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor before lifting to meet mine. There was something raw in his eyes, something I had never seen before. "You," he murmured, "you're what's been on my mind." My breath hitched. The space between us felt smaller, the air charged with something unspoken, yet undeniable. My heart pounded as his words hung between us, heavy and dangerous, teetering on the edge of something we couldn't take back. I swallowed, trying to find my voice. "Ethan, But he shook his head, stepping closer, his presence intoxicating. "I know it's wrong. I know I shouldn't feel this way, but I can't help it. Every time I come home, every time I see you, I want to be close to you, not as your stepson, as a man who—" He stopped himself, as if saying it out loud would make it impossible to undo. The silence was deafening, my pulse roaring in my ears. This was a line we shouldn't cross, and yet, I wasn't sure I wanted to step away. I took a slow breath, my heart hammering in my chest. Ethan's words hung in the air like a secret too dangerous to acknowledge, yet impossible to ignore. His blue eyes searched mine, waiting, hoping for something I wasn't sure I could give. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice barely holding steady. "This isn't— It's complicated." He let out a soft, almost bitter chuckle. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't been fighting this?" He took a step back, rubbing the back of his neck. I tried to push it away, to act normal, but every time I see you, every time you look at me like that— His voice broke, and he turned away. Like that? How had I been looking at him? Had I unknowingly betrayed my own emotions? I'd been in Ethan's life for years, ever since I married his father when he was 19. We had never been close back then. He was already a man, independent and forging his own path. But things changed after the divorce. His father had left, moving across the country, while Ethan stayed behind, his loyalty shocking even me. We had spent more time together, late nights filled with quiet conversations, stolen glances that neither of us had dared to acknowledge. And now, standing here, I could no longer deny the truth buried deep within me. But admitting it? That was something else entirely. "Ethan, you have your whole life ahead of you." I said, struggling to sound firm. You shouldn't waste your heart on me. His eyes darkened. You really think this is a choice? He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. Tell me you don't feel it too, and I'll walk away. I opened my mouth, but no words came, because lying to him would be the greatest betrayal of all. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating. Ethan's words lingered, challenging me, daring me to deny the very thing that had been gnawing at my soul. But I couldn't. My fingers clenched at my sides as I struggled to find the right response, something that would break this tension without shattering everything in its wake. But before I could speak, a sudden knock at the door startled us both. Ethan stiffened, his jaw tightening. I turned toward the entrance, my pulse racing for an entirely different reason now. At this hour, who could it be? I crossed the room and opened the door just enough to see who stood outside. My breath caught.
It was Daniel, my ex-husband. His presence felt like a ghost from another life. His suit was crisp, his expression unreadable, yet there was a weight in his gaze. Something knowing, something dangerous. "Surprised to see me?" he asked, his voice smooth yet laced with something darker. His eyes flickered past me, landing on Ethan, who had now stepped forward, his entire body radiating tension. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my voice even. Daniel smirked. "Oh, just checking in. I heard Ethan's been spending a lot of time here, more than usual." His gaze lingered on me, sharp and searching. "That's interesting, don't you think?" A chill ran down my spine. He knew, or at least he suspected. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. "You don't belong here." Daniel exhaled a quiet laugh, leaning slightly closer. "Maybe, but I think we all need to have a little conversation." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. This wasn't just a late-night visit. This was a warning. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Daniel's presence cast a shadow over everything, his gaze shifting between me and Ethan, reading between the lines, seeing the tension neither of us had been able to erase. I forced myself to stand tall, to keep my voice steady. "Daniel, it's late. Whatever you think is happening, you're wrong." He tilted his head slightly, his smirk deepening. "Am I?" His eyes flickered toward Ethan, who hadn't moved, his hands still balled into fists at his sides. "You've always been good at pretending, but I see things differently now. The late nights, the way he looks at you." My stomach twisted. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Ethan stepped forward, his voice sharp. "You have no right to come here and make accusations." Daniel chuckled, amused by Ethan's defiance. "You're protective, aren't you? That's interesting." His smirk faded, his voice lowering. "Tell me something, Ethan. Have you forgotten who she is to you?" Ethan's entire body tensed, his jaw tightening. "I know exactly who she is." Daniel sighed, as if disappointed. "You think this is love? You think this ends well?" He turned back to me, his gaze narrowing. "You should stop this before it goes too far." I felt my breath catch. It was already too far. Ethan took another step, closing the space between us. "You don't get to control this," he said, his voice low but firm. "Not anymore." Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line. He wasn't used to being challenged, least of all by his own son. "I won't let you ruin her," he finally said, his voice colder than before. Something inside me snapped. "Ruin me!" My voice shook, not with fear, but with fury. "You walked away, Daniel. You left me alone to pick up the pieces. Don't you dare stand here and act like you care." For the first time, his confidence wavered. A flicker of something, regret maybe, crossed his face, but it was gone just as fast. "Stay away from her," he said to Ethan, his voice heavy with warning. "That's the only advice I'll give you." He turned and stepped out the door, leaving behind nothing but tension and the echo of his threat. The door clicked shut, and silence filled the space. Ethan exhaled, running a hand down his face. "Are you okay?" I let out a shaky breath. "I don't know." He hesitated, then reached for me, his hand brushing mine. A simple touch, but it sent a shiver through me. I didn't pull away. "Do you want me to leave?" he asked softly. I looked up at him, at the storm in his blue eyes. The line we had been walking had disappeared, burned away by everything that had just happened. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to turn back. Ethan's fingers brushed against mine, hesitant yet electric, and for a brief moment, everything else faded. But before I could respond, before I could even process what I was feeling, the sharp ring of my phone shattered the silence. I hesitated before glancing at the screen. Unknown number. My gut twisted. "Who is it?" Ethan asked, his voice low. I shook my head and answered, pressing the phone to my ear. "Hello?" A distorted, static-filled voice came through the line. "You think you're safe?" My blood ran cold. "Who is this?" A slow chuckle. "You have no idea what's coming, do you?" The line went dead. My breath hitched. A prank? A mistake? No, something about that voice, something about the deliberate menace in it, felt terrifyingly real. Ethan immediately noticed my expression. "What's wrong?" I swallowed hard, gripping the phone. "I don't know. Someone just threatened me." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Give me the number." I shook my head. It was blocked. His eyes darkened, his protectiveness intensifying. "You think it was Daniel?" I wanted to believe it was just him being petty, but deep down, I knew better. Daniel could be ruthless, but he wasn't reckless. If he wanted to make a threat, he'd do it to my face. This was someone else, someone who knew about us, and whoever they weren't finished yet. The weight of the threat still clung to me, my pulse hammering as I gripped my phone. Ethan stood beside me, his body rigid with barely contained fury. "We need to go," he said, his voice firm. "We can't just sit here waiting for whoever that was to make the next move." I hesitated. "Go where?" "To my place. You'll be safe there." A part of me wanted to resist, to say that running wouldn't solve anything, but the fear creeping into my bones told me otherwise. Whoever had called wasn't bluffing. Ethan grabbed his keys, his hand slipping into mine with quiet determination. "Come on." The drive was silent, thick with tension. When we finally arrived, Ethan locked the door behind us and turned to me. "I won't let anything happen to you." His words, his presence, the way he looked at me, it was all too much. Every suppressed feeling, every stolen glance, every moment of hesitation evaporated in an instant. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. "Ethan!" His lips crashed against mine before I could finish, years of unspoken longing breaking free. There was no hesitation now, no more second guessing. The world outside could be chaos, but here, in this moment, we were exactly where we were meant to be. Just as I let myself sink into him, my phone buzzed again. Another message. "You should have listened. Now it's too late." A chill ran through me. This wasn't over, not even close. Ethan and I stared at the message, the weight of those 6 words settling over us like a storm cloud. "You should have listened. Now it's too late." I felt my stomach twist. Too late for what? Ethan snatched the phone from my hand, his jaw tight. "I'm done with this." Without hesitation, he dialed the number back. To my shock, it rang. 1, 2, 3 times. Then someone answered, a deep breath, then a low, familiar chuckle. "Daniel." "I warned you." His voice slithered through the phone. "But you didn't listen." Ethan's grip tightened around the device. "What the hell are you playing at?" Daniel exhaled, as if disappointed. "You'll find out soon enough." Then the line went dead. A heavy silence stretched between us, and then a knock at the door. My breath hitched. Ethan moved in front of me, shielding me instinctively as he crept toward the door. My heart pounded as he peered through the peephole. His entire body stiffened. "It's the police." I felt the blood drain from my face. Ethan opened the door cautiously. Two officers stood there, serious and unreadable. Ethan Carter. Yes. One officer glanced at me before handing Ethan a folded piece of paper. We need you to come with us, now. My chest tightened as Ethan opened the paper. His expression darkened as his hands curled into fists. A restraining order. Daniel wasn't just threatening us, he was trying to tear us apart. But as I met Ethan's determined gaze, I knew one thing for sure. We weren't going down without a fight. What did you think of the story? Did you enjoy the twists? Let us know in the comments. Also, what kind of stories would you like to hear next?